Hey everybody, this is Kuuimpact with Let's Play The Night of the Rabbit, the final part. We're gonna listen to one more story from Mousewood. This one, this one probably hits
Mole
closest to
sat
Coo's
at
heart.
his new
So,
desk, looking
by heart
through
I
his
mean,
thick spectacles at the letter he had written so very
as
carefully.
an artist, I understand.
He'd reread the lines several times now, just as carefully as he had written them, to make sure he hadn't misspelt anything. The Mole was no seasoned writer. Back in the old days he had occasionally written his wife long letters. That was many years ago, but his wife still saw the bold writer of days long gone in him, so she took every opportunity to remind her husband of his talents. She had a soft spot for talented animals. That's why she was also the head of the Mousewood Art Society,
I almost thought it was going
organising
to say she was
exhibitions
Mousewood
and
Bicycle
readings
and
every
everyone was
second
giving her a
Thursday,
ride.
featuring paintings and poems by Mousewood's resident artists. If there was an exhibition or reading
artists,
scheduled, letters had to be sent to all members of the society, and Ludwig had to write those letters. Admittedly, his new desk did make the work actually more convenient. This letter, however, was especially important. Ludwig got up from his chair, took the letter and walked over to the massive wooden door leading from his study to the hallway. If he had employed a secretary, this is where she would have sat, typing on her typewriter. But Ludwig didn't have a secretary. What he did have, however, was a kind neighbour who helped him write the letters. Nicholas the lizard sat in the hallway, his slouch hat in his hands.
Oh, lizards are allowed here? I thought they were the enemy.
Nicholas rose, straightening his jacket. "G'day," Nicholas said. "My wife asked you to assist me, didn't she?" Ludwig asked, squinting because the lizard was too slim to be seen properly by a mole. "She certainly did." "Jolly good. Well, here's the text," Ludwig said, offering the sheet of paper to the hat stand, which did have a slight resemblance to Nicholas. The lizard shuffled over to the mole, took the sheet from his hands and looked at it. Then Mrs. Mole came in, happy to find Nicholas and her Ludwig getting along. She liked companionable animals. "Ludwig, have you written the letter?" she asked. She saw the sheet of paper and yanked it out of the lizard's hands, since she was in a hurry. "Splendid, Ludwig," she called out, skimming through the text before giving Nicholas the letter back. Then she pushed both men through the door into the study and said, "Now the two of you copy this text till we have enough letters, one for every resident of Mousewood.
What?
Hurry up, and please, in your best handwriting." Then she closed the door. The lizard and the mole started to write the invitations.
Oh, the
2 days
invitations
later,
is the
a
first,
postman came by
the
to
treetop
pick
party.
up the letters and take them to the post office. As a tired Nicholas and an overwrought Ludwig handed him the bundle, he could have sworn both of them had been close friends for years and years. In fact, it had only been 2 days. The following Thursday, the beaver, head of the post office beside the stream, was sorting parcels by address and addressee at his huge sorting desk. The water wheel clattered as the rivulet made its babbling way downstream, when suddenly the post office door opened and the wizard entered. As he crossed the old wooden floor, one couldn't be sure if it was the wood or the old man's bones that were creaking. As usual, the wizard had come to bother the beaver with the same question he'd been asking for weeks. The old man cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Master Beaver, but is there any post for me?"
Where's my post? I need my mail. In earlier stories, there was a whole story about that. We didn't read that one.
For an instant, he thought it was just the wizard's strange sense of humor.
The wizard has a wizard sense, and he always
considered
senses
the
that he might
possibility
get
that
mail.
the wizard himself could have gone a bit strange due to his incredible age. He looked into the wizard's eyes, wondering how old he might be. "Master Beaver?" the wizard said, not sure if he had already asked for his post or not. Not because he was old and forgetful, but because the beaver hadn't responded. "As I've already told you, we deliver post directly to your home, and nothing has been forgotten," the beaver reassured him. And if he'd been taller, he might even have patted the old man on the back to comfort him. "There is definitely post for me." the wizard said with conviction. Haven't we discussed this already?
Yeah, in an
asked the
earlier
beaver.
story that,
Since it was too complicated to explain why he hadn't
to listen
actually
to,
been
but he didn't
mistaken, not even
record.
the first time, the wizard didn't waste time explaining. But he didn't give in either. Listen. All the residents of Mousewood have had post in recent days. Each and every one. Only my letter seems to be missing, said the wizard.
What an interesting thing to say.
I delivered my own post just yesterday, the beaver said, but I haven't had time to read it yet. You should maybe check your post box thoroughly. You may find your letter. Slowly but surely the wizard was getting impatient. He had already checked his own post box to such a degree he was worried he had overdone it. So the bearded man opened the wooden case he carried on his shoulder and took out his magic wand.
Now you done it.
In
He's
fact,
going to fireball
a
the whole
real
damn
wizard
town
doesn't
hall.
need a wand to cast spells, but by using his wand he could demonstrate to the beaver there was magic involved. Silence and focus were now essential. The wizard waved his wand. Magic sparks zapped through the air, glistening in iridescent colours. The wizard then murmured magic words in a language long forgotten. Roughly translated, it meant, "Watch out! There is magic about to happen, and you never know with magic, so don't complain or anything."
That's what it translates
Then he
to? I
pointed
don't know
the
about
wand
that spell,
into the
man.
room, and a short burst of lightning shot out of the tip and, with a sizzle, hit the cupboard on the wall by the sorting desk. This literally breathed life into the cupboard, and it started to lumber towards the wizard and the beaver on
What the
short
hell?
wooden legs. The wizard seemed even more startled than the beaver. Luckily, the march of the furniture came to a halt a moment later. By the wall, where the massive cupboard had until that moment stood, lay a letter on the floor. It must have fallen off the desk. The beaver picked up the envelope and read the address. To the wizard, Mousewood.
To the Wizard of
The
Mousewood.
old man opened the envelope and skimmed the contents. Dear friends and neighbours, the Mousewood Art Society is happy to invite you to a very special occasion. Next Thursday, one of Mousewood's great artists will exhibit his paintings to the public for the first time. These works, created over recent years, depict the forest and its residents in the most diverse situations and circumstances. You may even discover yourself in the paintings of this extraordinary artist, and you will certainly see the forest from a new perspective.
Is the beaver saying this? Yeah, I think
We
it's
look
the beaver
forward to
reading
welcoming you next Thursday
It's not the
at
cabinet
Marigold
talking, right?
Meadows. Best wishes, the Mousewood Art Society. The wizard gave the letter back to the beaver.
it. Oh no, it was the wizard.
The latter pondered a while, since he wasn't sure if he was allowed to read it. After all, it wasn't addressed to him. Deep down, of course, the beaver knew one shouldn't read foreign post. But since this letter was addressed to all residents of Mousewood, and his own letter waited unread at home, and it was okay with the wizard, he read it anyway. Nice today, isn't it? Said the beaver. Right now, to be precise, replied the wizard. Can we make it in time? Asked the beaver. The wizard's eyes flashed. They flashed with the same magic that had moved the cupboard, and was now, with a bit of luck and focus, to get them to Marigold Meadows in time.
They're going
We
to cheat
can,
time because he's
the
a
wizard
time
said
wizard.
confidently.
He won the coin flip.
The beaver and the wizard left the post office, and after the beaver had locked the door, the wizard lifted him onto his shoulders. Then the old man focused intensely, channeling magic powers. He hadn't done that in quite a while, so he wasn't sure if it would work. But then it happened. The wizard was no longer standing on solid ground, but instead floating a good 5 inches above it. The beaver hung on tight to the wizard's collar as the old man accelerated, going faster and faster until he was racing at high speed along the dusty tracks leading to Mousewood, with the beaver still
So he
clinging
kind of
to his
Studio
shoulder.
Ghibli flew.
It was quite a sight. The wizard stood upright and unmoving, yet gliding fast, raising clouds of dust behind him as his white beard fluttered in the wind. As the wizard and the beaver headed towards Mousewood, they flew over a small animal with a bushy auburn tail and beady black eyes as it popped out of the bushes. It was Edward the squirrel.
Edward the
Edward had
squirrel.
gone missing a few days previously during a practice session of popping out from behind something. The squirrel had used the time to think about his life, acorns and nuts. Seeing him, the wizard broke his stride, swaying in mid-air like a buoy in a choppy sea. "Edward, what are you still doing here?" the beaver asked the squirrel from the wizard's shoulder. "Why, hello," Edward said. "Have I missed something?" "We're in a hurry," the wizard said, "and you are invited."
And you are
As
invited.
spoke,
And he grabs
the old
him
man
and squeezes
tapped
him
the
until
wooden
his eyes
case
pop out of
strapped
his
to
head.
his right side with his left hand. Edward needed no further explanation. Swiftly he climbed up the wizard's leg, leapt onto the wooden case, and held tight to the leather straps. The wizard went back a few paces and then took off over the forest track again at high speed. "I don't think this is going to work," shouted Rushlight. He was en route with his old friend Mr. Brown on a cart borrowed from the Badgers. Rushlight was pedalling the bicycle, propelling the cart as hard as he could, but it wasn't moving. "We're running late," Mr. Brown called out, sitting back.
We're late, so very late.
"We should probably call for help." "There's no one around for miles," Rushlight said, exhausted. "Then we've got to call some attention to ourselves," Mr. Brown said, and yelled, "Hello? Anybody out there?" There was no answer, but suddenly a strong wind blew up, taking Mr. Brown's hat along in the process and leaving it somewhere up in the branches.
And leaving him to take double damage
Chubby
from
Mouse
anything that hits
wistfully
him
watched
now.
his headpiece disappear.
He needs to go get his
"My
hat back
apologies,"
where he once
the wind
lost it.
said from some distance away. Then it turned and approached the mice in a wide curve. As it got closer, it took on the shape of an elderly wizard. An elderly wizard floating along with a beaver on his shoulder and a squirrel at his side. At
We're
this
starting to
sight,
get like a
Mr. Brown
contrived
put his
stack
paw
of
to the
animals
spot
on
where
top
his
of
hat
an
had
old
just
man.
been.
Like Noah in that one
The
NES
wizard
game.
looked up and hovered straight to the treetops, slowly spinning. He collected Mr. Brown's fedora from between the
Oh
branches
no, fedora.
and then descended slowly to the ground.
You fedora tipping
"Here you
asshole.
are," the wizard said, handing Mr. Brown his hat. "Much appreciated," Mr. Brown replied. "Are you going to the exhibition?" he asked, pointing at the wizard's case. One corner of the envelope was poking out, enough to give Mr. Brown a clue as to where they were heading.
Yes.
"Indeed we are. You, however, seem to be suffering some difficulties and are now worried you may be late, I assume," the wizard said, pointing to the cart stuck in the muddy forest earth. Stuck deep enough to tell the wizard Mr. Brown and Rushlight needed help. Unlike Mr. Brown, the wizard usually needed more than just one clue to solve problems the classical way, in other words, without magic. In this case, though, he was right first time. "Your assumption is correct," Mr. Brown answered. "Well, you're welcome to travel with us," the wizard offered. "We
I
still
hear the
have some
trains
room."
in real life in the
He
distance
lifted
blowing their
Mr.
whistle.
Brown onto his right shoulder and helped Rushlight.
I know that's
to
not getting
climb
picked up on the mic
case.
because it wasn't like doing
The
anything,
brawny
but I
mouse
heard them.
greeted Edward with a firm handshake. "Name's Rushlight," he said. "Good day," replied Edward. The wizard accelerated again, and together with the post office beaver, Edward, Mr. Brown, and Rushlight, he floated on to Marigold Meadows. There are so many animals in Mousewood that a mighty wizard wanting to attend an exhibition has to expect to give some of them a lift. A great many animals had already gathered at Marigold Meadows, excitedly waiting for the Art Society exhibition. On the grass stood dozens of easels, still covered in white linen to make the grand opening even more exciting.
They haven't revealed
Dressed
the art
in an
yet.
elegant black suit, Mr. Ludwig Mole nervously checked his pocket watch. Only a few more minutes until he was supposed to hold the opening speech. It was only a few lines long, but he had practiced it several times nonetheless. With a speech only a couple of lines long, it would be especially embarrassing to fluff or forget something. Ludwig looked around, somewhat disoriented.
Well, if he's the same
Nicholas?
Ludwig Borrower
Yeah,
that is
tapping
the
the
guy who
shoulder
does
of
the
the case
radio,
next
then
to
he's
him.
going to forget something. He always
This
messes
was
up the
in
number.
fact Plato the frog, who at least resembled Nicholas in terms of colour.
Oh, and Plato's here.
To Ludwig, Plato, however, was an amorphous shade, while Nicholas was more of a blurred, slender line. "Yes," said Plato. the frog was just talking to Jonas the otter about a song he'd heard recently. "Oh, you're not Nicholas, no," Ludwig concluded in confusion. "He's right over there," Jonas said. "Nicholas!" he shouted,
Nicholas!
beckoning to his fellow musician. The lizard walked over. Jonas pointed to the mole and then continued his conversation with Plato. "Showtime, I think?" Nicholas asked his friend Ludwig. "Ah, there you are. Yes, we're about to start," Ludwig replied, calmly, now that his good friend was there. "Break a leg," Nicholas said, slapping the mole on the back. Ludwig took a deep breath and started walking through the audience. On the way, he accidentally bumped into one of the wood dwarves, who was talking to Peter the badger and his wife. "Oi, watch it!" said
Oi,
the
watch it!
wood dwarf. "I'm sure it was an accident," said the badger lady, trying to calm him down. "Accident? Pah!" commented Steinberg. Ludwig was far too busy to notice what was going on around him. He eventually reached the podium.
Nothing
and
is
took
an
off
accident,
his glasses,
you animals.
polishing them with a handkerchief.
Savages,
Then he
savages.
gave the audience time to quieten down and prepare for the speech. Soon the animals and a wood sprite fell silent in anticipation. Ludwig's wife was in the front row, quietly applauding to reassure her husband. "Dear guests, it is a great pleasure to welcome all of you tonight here at Marigold Meadows," Ludwig began, but was immediately interrupted by the muffled boom of approaching thunder. The guests turned in the direction the sound was coming from. In a cloud of dust and leaves, the wizard appeared from the forest.
He is the storm approaching.
Right in front of the astonished visitors. As the dust settled, he set down the beaver, Mr. Brown, Rushlight, and Edward the squirrel. At once Edward ran to his friends Oswald and Edgar, who had arrived half an hour before.
Edward the squirrel was Edith the squirrel's uncle,
and,
from what she told, I think.
Ludwig continued. "The Mousewood Art Society proudly and for the first time presents the work of an artist, a resident of Mousewood like all of us here. His paintings, completed over recent years, depict the forest from various points of view, and of course the perspective of the artist himself. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the exhibition open." The first story.
And then it finishes. It's done. So that is a couple of the stories that you can have read here. I don't know what videos are, but we're gonna check it out. Oh, these are the nails, the trunk, the marquee spawning in, the Great Zaroff. Oh, okay. Oh my. Look at that Jerry Hazelnut face. We're gonna end it on his face here in the sad violin music playing. So this has been Kuuimpact with Let's Play The Night of the Rabbit, the poll winner for our Daedalic Entertainment point-and-click game. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment. There was a lot of things that I forgot about this game, and there was a lot of things that I remembered about this game. And the stuff that I remembered is the stuff that I actually kind of don't like about it. Like, this is like middle ground for me. Personally, I prefer Anna's Quest. But that's my personal opinion. Or Edna and Harvey. Hell, I haven't actually gone through Deponia, but I own the complete collection. Which I don't know what comes in the complete collection, but I'd assume all of them. I don't know, see, because I don't know if Deponia Doomsday is in it. I think it's the other three and not Doomsday. But yeah. It's still a really good game. It has its moments. And I just think it's extremely boring to go through all of those. Like, it's so it goes on, some of those stories. Ad tedium. Listening to the shorter stories was just my only option. Trust me. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. We're already approaching 20 minutes on this one for one story. So, this pretty much concludes the block. This should be the last video uploaded for the block. All other LPs for this block are completed. which means I will see you in the next block, which we've been working on it, and so far we got a lineup. It's gonna be a mini block, meaning 4 games. Only 4 games. Nothing too terrible, insane. Plan to have that ready for you. Just taking a small break through August, maybe a little bit of early September, and then I'll be back mid-September, early October for more Let's Play goodness. Now, none of this is gonna matter once the future comes, but the future always marches on. There's always a future to look forward to. Remember this. It's what we learned in Mousewood through the whole LP. So this has been Kuuimpact, signing off.